Saturday night, I mean, we saw, this is the most out there, unbelievably surprising, shocking, to the point nobody believed it when they first saw it. You know that you are dealing in unique territory when word from Shams hits Twitter and nobody believes it. Not only just, wow, what a terrible trade. Oh, what are the Mavericks thinking? That came later. The initial thought was, okay, this is not true. Someone hacked Shams, ha ha ha. As I'm watching, I mean, everything was going on. And then all of a sudden, there's no other way to put it, but this Laker-Maverick trade is the most bizarre, enormous, culture-shifting. Like, it's being brought up on the Grammys last night. This is the most out-there trade in my lifetime, in any sport. When you consider how impactful superstars are in the NBA, even if the Yankees were to move Aaron Judge, even if the Dodgers were to trade Shohei Ohtani, I mean, I guess you can get into levels, and I know everybody seems to be out there. Put this in football terms. I hate those tweets so much. But, the quarterback in the NFL, right? That impactful. This is moving on from Joe Burrow. This is moving on from Patrick Mahomes. This is, although he's had championships, and obviously Luka has not. But to trade a superstar who led you to the NBA Finals the year before at 25 years old, and to do it under the cover of darkness of night, where nobody got wind of it, and then to get the return they got for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 first-round pick is mind-blowing. And I mean, it's one of those you remember where you were, and especially for me and all the other ramifications. I got the Knick game on one TV. I got the Royal Rumble with the kids on another. Like, it was just, you will remember where you were when this trade hit. It is as crazy as it can be. And I agree, when we get down to it, to me, it's about the Dallas Mavericks. Because we can get, and I agree with Windhorst. I don't know if you saw him on ESPN talk about the situation. This is amazing to me, what the Dallas Mavericks and their GM Nico Harrison did here. This is a complete repudiation of Luka Doncic. That's exactly what this is. And you listen to his press conference, and I believe every word that nobody knew, because you could see Jason Kidd sitting there having nothing to say and is absolutely furious at what just happened to his team. Because there is no doubt about it. We're going to talk about all the ramifications of it. The point of this whole thing is, the idea of trading Luka is crazy enough. The idea of trading an offensive talent at 25 years old, who took you to the NBA championship last year, who has his flaws, and we'll get into why this trade was made, apparently. Not a perfect player necessarily, but this is a guy who could put up 70. This is a guy who could hit any shot on the floor. This is a 25-year-old superstar who has changed your franchise and took you to the NBA Finals last year. And you are trading him for a 32 going on 45-year-old center who can't stay on the floor, and trying to frame it in, it helps us in the short term. It is, and not only that, right, on the surface of that, it's crazy enough. And if you think about it, as much as I'll tell you Luka's 25 and Luka's a superstar and you don't trade these players, I could understand if you look at it and just say, you know what, the Dallas Mavericks have had issues with him. There's reports that he's ballooned up to 260 plus, almost 270 pounds. They don't trust his conditioning. They think his defense is atrocious. And that was a talking point of last year's NBA Finals. They attacked Luka offensively. he is a poor defensive player. And that's putting it kindly. And if he's showing inability to stay conditioned, and you are looking at paying him $300+ million in a supermax contract next year, trading Luka Doncic isn't the craziest thing in the world. I would never do it. I would never contemplate it. I would build around him. I would figure out a way to get him motivated if I had an issue with that. I would figure out a way to keep one of the great players at 25 years old on my team. That's what I would do. But if you're going to tell me you trade him, it's plausible on some level. But to do it this secretly, to go after one player in specific, and that's what you're hearing, and that's pretty much what Nico Harrison told you. They believe getting Anthony Davis is the key to this. That he is somehow, with his defense, his rim protection, his offensive skill set, who, make no mistake, he's a great player. He's a great player who can't stay healthy, who's 7 years older, and who isn't nearly worth the value of trading Luka Doncic. So on the surface, it's a horrendous trade. Everybody knows it. Everybody's laughing at it. It is a horrendous, horrible, and if I'm a Mavericks fan, I am sick to my stomach. But the point is, forget even all of that. To do it as they did it, it's almost as if Nico Harrison, and they kept it this tight. They didn't talk to their coach. They didn't talk to anybody on the team. They did this they didn't talk to another single team. They were afraid of public perception holding this down. They didn't want anyone attempting to talk them out of it. They didn't want anyone, because the public outcry from the fan base and the rest of the NBA, if you make it public that you are trading Luka Doncic, it makes it so much harder to get it done. This was about, I need him off my team. Nico Harrison firmly believes the franchise is in far better standing without paying Luka Doncic. And to not shop, arguably, the most valuable piece when you consider what he's done already in the league, when you consider he's 25 years old, when you consider he took your team to the NBA Finals, he puts up 70 points. He is one of the more offensively productive players in the NBA. He has changed that franchise. He is a superstar at 25. You could argue he is the most, or one of the most valuable chips in the NBA. To not shop him, to see what you could get for him. Because we could tie locally here, and I know Evan was talking about it on the Rico. Think of how many first-round picks the Nets could offer him. Think of how many different teams would be willing to move heaven and earth to get a superstar the likes of Luka. The idea that they had no interest in trying to maximize their return on it is unbelievably asinine. And it's hard to fathom. This was just, we need him off the team. I don't want any distractions. I don't want the public outcry. I don't want to hear it from Jason Kidd. I don't want to hear it from the teammates. I don't want things leaking out. Oh, you can't do this. I don't want the Brian Windhorsts or the, Charles Barkley or anybody else's of the world on television saying you can't make this trade. There's no value for Luka worth it. You can't do it. They didn't want any of that. In the darkness of night, over the last 3 weeks, they have made it their goal, and when I say they, it feels like Nico Harrison and no one else made it their goal to get Luka off the roster. And the only way to do that without complications, without looking foolish like he does today, he's perfectly okay with looking like the moron of the NBA today. He did not want to look like the moron of the NBA while shopping him. This is flat out. They are selling the idea of Luka being good enough to earn that contract, good enough to be the guy who's the face of that franchise, and good enough in the short term to help them get to an NBA championship. And they didn't want any hurdle. They didn't want any problems, and they purposely made as bad a trade as you could possibly make just to get it done. And to have that kind of value, and to not see what others are willing to give, because again, trading him is stupid to me. But to not shop him to every team in the NBA to see what could possibly be out there. Who knows? Who knows what teams would be willing to give you for a player of Luka's ability, who they believe could come in and get him motivated, who they believe could come in and help him become a more productive defensive player and just become the next Laker. He's going to be the face of the Los Angeles Lakers for the next 6-7 years. And to hear the comments from Nico Harrison talking about, well, who the future is the next 2 or 3 years. And by then I'll be buried. I'm surprised he's not buried today. I don't know how this possibly could happen. Could you argue, like, is there a chance that Kyrie and Anthony Davis are even better on the floor together, even though they won a championship, than LeBron and AD? I could see that pairing working very well on the floor at the same time. I could. And, clearly now the Lakers become a far worse defensive team. A far worse defensive team. So this isn't even about whether or not this makes the Lakers a clear-cut Western Conference Finals favorite or an NBA championship favorite, or like whether or not this makes the Mavericks a far worse team, or like that's not even what we're talking about. We're talking about a land-shifting, franchise-changing move that was made in silence, in a world of social media where you can't keep anything silent. Anything. And Rob Pelinka and Nico Harrison were able to keep the biggest trade in my sports history. I cannot think of a bigger, more surprising, more outreaching, more crazy trade in the history of professional sports since I've been following it since the early 90s. That's how crazy this trade is. And to think that this GM purposely told, no one, and I firmly believe it's crazy as it sounds. Like, I don't know when LeBron knew, or LeBron knew something was cooking, or the possibility of it. He runs that franchise, right? So I'm sure LeBron had some idea. But the idea that Jason Kidd has no idea, and when asked in the press conference, it was one of the funnier things you saw today, in my opinion. The reporter kind of asked the two of them, as you were like getting on the precipice of this trade and making this trade, how do you feel like it works for the basketball? And immediately, Jason Kidd shows no interest in answering the question, and Nico steps in a second and goes, no, this is all me. Jason didn't know any of this. He's not asking his coach the opinion of trading their 25-year-old superstar who took them to the NBA Finals last year. He doesn't even want the coach's opinion. This seems like one rogue, general manager running the franchise, and who made it up in his mind that he, for the best interest of the franchise, had to move on from a superstar player, and he didn't want any hurdle in his way. He didn't want Jason Kidd screaming in his office or threatening to quit or anything like that. He didn't want the public perception out there while he shopped him, because clearly, like anyone with a normal brain would tell you, if I have an asset like this, if for anything, but if I have an asset like Luka Doncic, I have to shop him on the open market and see what kind of trade could possibly be in the works. Who knows how many first round picks? We saw what Bridges got. The Knicks gave up, a half a dozen first-round picks. They got one in Anthony Davis. For Luka Doncic. This was, it is hard to fathom. They didn't want anybody saying what I'm saying. They didn't want the outcry from the fan base. They didn't, because shopping him publicly creates hurdles. As much as you might get the better prospects or, draft picks or package or whatever, however you want to put it in the NBA, although you clearly could open yourself up to making a deal that you could probably sleep with at night a little bit better than I'm watching right now. Jason Kidd's literally numb. Jason Kidd is numb. Shopping him on the open market clearly gets you the better deal, clearly opens you up to a world of possibilities if you determine you have to move him. The only way to do it is to put him out there unless you are afraid of all of the ramifications and noise getting in the way. Because he fully admitted Luka didn't request the trade out. Luka never made it in any way, shape, or form, even floated the idea that he wouldn't sign the Supermax with them. And on that angle, you know how much money Luka is losing? He's losing hundreds of millions of dollars. When you include the no tax in Dallas versus the California tax code, plus the idea that he can only sign now a max contract that's worth about $100 million less. You add in the tax, Luka just lost $150 million. He didn't want public outcry from the fan base, the rest of the NBA. He didn't want Luka voicing his displeasure. He didn't want the coach voicing his displeasure. So instead of getting the best return on value, he decided to pick a player in Anthony Davis that he knew was probably available, for Luka, of course, that he thought solved some of the defensive issues they had. Imagine working the two-man offense of Kyrie and AD, as well as actually protecting the rim and playing some defense, and just made the worst trade that I can ever remember in the darkness of night so nobody could tell him how stupid it was. This is one of the more surprising, shocking, culture-shifting, changing. It's going to be the talk of the day here in New York sports radio. It was mentioned at the Grammys. This is as memorable a trade as there's ever been in professional sports.